my favorite Psalms is Psalm 139, where David describes in amazement that an all-powerful God is so involved in our individual lives that he knows when I sit and when I rise. In a piece of biblical poetry famous for its rich description of God's power exemplified through his intimate knowledge and involvement with individuals, the most interesting section to me are verses 13 through 16. In those verses, David discusses how even before he was born, God was directly and intimately involved in forming him and planning his life. In verse 13, the phrase, "knit me together in my mother's womb," is used to describe God's attention to the intricate details of creating us. This verse always reminds me of my son's birth. My wife Lisa and I had tried for 5 years to have children, and after much prayer, patience, and considerable expense, we learned in August of 2002 that she was expecting. Though we were considered to have a high-risk pregnancy due to a multitude of factors, every visit to the doctor provided good news about the progress of our child. We learned that we were having a boy and spent a lot of time deciding on a name for our soon-to-arrive son. At the same time, we were building a house, and there were hundreds of decisions to make about things like lighting fixtures, paint colors, appliances, and even the placement of power outlets. Thankfully, Lisa was very willing to make those decisions, as I nodded approvingly to all of her ideas. It wasn't our intention that these two major life events, building a house and having a baby, would intersect this way. But God's timing is frequently not ours. It seemed that we'd been praying and dreaming about both things for so long, we were just excited that they were both finally happening. We moved into our new house on the first Sunday of February in 2003. One dream down, one more to go. Our son, to be known as LJ, short for Lyndon Jr., was going to be born in May. Just enough time to settle into our new home and prepare it for our new arrival. We're still not sure what caused Lisa to start leaking amniotic fluid 2 days later. Maybe it was the stress of the move. But her doctor didn't feel that it was safe for her to be anywhere but in a bed in a hospital till our son was ready to come. Our official due date was still 12 weeks away, but now we were told it could be any time. Psalm 139:16 says, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." We realized that despite the impressive technology, expert physicians, and talented and caring nurses and other staff that attended to Lisa in the maternity unit at Shands Hospital at the University of Florida, the fact that God himself was in the process of forming our unborn son was all we could really depend on. Family and friends all over the world engaged in daily prayers for us. Those prayers encouraged us that God would fulfill his promise to us. Lisa's doctor was hoping just to make it to 32 weeks before a decision on when to deliver LJ by cesarean section would have to be made. According to the staff, 32 weeks represented a critical threshold in an unborn child's development. We kept praying for 32 weeks and were encouraged by the daily non-stress tests, as they called them, on the baby that assured the medical staff that things were going well. I received a phone call late one evening while still at work in the middle of week 31 from Lisa's doctor telling me that I needed to get to the hospital as soon as I could because that day's non-stress test hadn't detected movement and they needed to get LJ out right now. As much as I wanted to believe, that this was all part of God's plan that had been ordained for our son before he was conceived. My mind was full of apprehension as I raced to the hospital. Couldn't we just make it to 32 weeks, I thought? I arrived at the delivery room and changed into scrubs just as the operation was about to begin. Lisa and I held hands as we prayed one more time. A few minutes later, the loud squeals of a tiny 3-pound, 8-ounce baby boy brought unspeakable joy to both of us. In that delivery room, on that evening, God once again displayed his power and his intimacy with the both of us, even while he was still knitting LJ together in his mother's womb. That delivery room on that evening of March 5th of 2003 became a very sacred place for our family, where we shared sacred time together with our God. Verse 14 of Psalm 139 says, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." We saw that in our newborn son that evening, and we still see it in him every day, how he is fearfully and wonderfully made. Over 9 years have passed since that night in Gainesville, Florida, and LJ is a lot bigger and louder than he was then. But we will never forget God's presence that night in that sacred place.